Eric Averill, and I'm joined by my partner Brandon Averill. Today,
Disclaimer: Eric Averill and Brandon Averill are the co-founders of AWM Capital. Due to industry regulations, it's essential to explicitly state that investment or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you, and you should discuss your specific situation with a qualified, certified financial planner. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of AWM Capital or its affiliates. For more information, visit athleteceo.com.
Today's guest leveraged his NFL career into a platform to motivate and cultivate his family and community. From founding one of the fastest growing churches in America to owning 6 car dealerships and many business and franchise deals later, he's steadily developing the culture and people he can reach with his earned influence. Andre Wadsworth is a former 3rd overall NFL pick, entrepreneur, investor, family man, and as you'll shortly hear, an incredible storyteller. Athletes are going to love hearing about Andre's surprising advice to young athletes and his advice to pros and celebrities on navigating the problems that arise from having influence in the platforms today. Entrepreneurs and high performers will love Andre's story of leveraging his pro sports career into an entrepreneurial success story and now having a portfolio of successful ventures and deals. You'll also hear Andre's wisdom on balancing sports and business with family and his thoughts on the importance of including your family in on your career. Let's now go over to my conversation with the businessman, athlete, and lovable giant, Andre Wadsworth. Andre, thanks for being on the Athlete CEO podcast. I'm excited for our audience to be able to just hear your story. As our audience is usually professional athletes or business owners, and you have this great combination of both, so really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to chat.
Good to connect with you again. Haven't seen you in a while. It's a great opportunity to catch up as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a place that I thought would be fun to start is your football career, and not necessarily what people can go on Google and read, but for our audience, a lot of them are still in their careers or just getting started and have gone through the draft recently. And one of the first questions that I have is, if you can take us back to that journey of going from being a senior in college to all of a sudden you're the 3rd overall pick, you go from having a loot check to now all of a sudden a large signing bonus and wealth. What was that mental transition going from really having nothing to a lot now?
Well, I think I was in a unique situation, and I knew I was at that time. Sometimes you might not realize it, but I really realized it at that time because I didn't go to play sports, college, to play professional sports. I wanted to, but I knew that education was a big thing. Florida State had a good business school. I loved Florida State as a football program and loved playing for Coach Bowden. But I was hopefully, if I have an opportunity, I knew that it was going to be a platform that can help me with relationships, and if not, also help me on another level financially. So I knew I was going to do that, but I never thought that I'd be the 3rd pick overall. Have a $10 million signing bonus. Right. Had no idea that it would be that way. So I was prepared in the standpoint of, I'm going to own my own business. I always wanted to own my own business. I always wanted to be in business. My dad was in business for a very long time and grew up in his business. So I think being in that environment of being around my dad, growing up in the business, it had a different mindset. So I wasn't just looking for sports as the home run. I was looking at, that could be a very big win for me, if not a platform. Sports is one of the greatest platforms. Not just even from a financial standpoint of playing professional sports, but it's like a fraternity. Especially you play college level, you end up because it's only a bunch of elite guys that you play against. You remember the names, and you develop character, work ethic, struggle, success. There's so many things, fight, adversity. There's so many things that you learn, and that you learn through sports and high level sports. So I say I was just a little bit different on that,
Yeah.
that standpoint, because I wasn't a high recruit either coming out of high school.
Right, because you walked on at Florida State?
Walked
right?
on, yeah. I only got partial scholarships to Liberty University and Stony Brook in Long Island, New York. Actually, if I would have went to Stony Brook, believe it or not, I would have met a good friend, not a good friend anymore because we ran out of touch, but we trained together, we were friends, was the Twins reliever, Joe Nathan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we would have been at the same time at Stony Brook at the same time, because we ended up connecting later on in our professional careers and stuff like that. But those are only 2 schools, and
Wow.
then I always wanted to play for Florida State and also play for Coach Bowden. I liked UM coming from Miami, hated the Gators, and still hate the Gators to this day. And I just want to make sure I say that.
Yeah, got to get that on record. Seminole Nation will be happy about that.
Yeah.
So I think you definitely were a little bit unique as far as the athlete coming out and transitioning into that, and being, a college-educated player is a lot different than sometimes our high school kids that come into this
Basketball,
baseball. How did you even, obviously you had a great foundation with your dad having his automotive, stores, and so you've seen business around growing up, but still that's real money, in your transition. How did you choose who to surround yourself with? Like, walk me through the first year of that type of money.
Well, number one, to say that you're not scared, I was scared. You're always scared because it's a big responsibility, because you want to help everybody. I want to help my brothers and sisters. You want to do all this stuff, and then you hear statistics, of athletes going completely broke, have nothing, just living on the streets, all that kind of stuff. So you get scared, because the responsibility of it. So I think that's one thing that you have, but it's still a good challenge. I think the thing that was very helpful is that you always look for people that's been there and done that. And so my agent was a big part in that. It was, he's passed away. One of my agents passed away now, but, it was Roosevelt Barnes, and he's still alive, but he was a big part of having other guys, because, at the time he had Emmitt Smith, Deion Sanders, a lot of good players around that's played a while and has made some money. They were in there either 10-year or 8 years into the pros, and then had some retired guys as well. And so you look at that and you say, okay, this guy's been through more cycles than I have. I just got in. So you look at that, because obviously they have paved the way, and you want to do that. So you'd be foolish not to look at older guys and guys that's been there. How did they transition? What are they doing? And what would they do now? And ask them the questions, what would you do differently?
Yeah. If you were sitting with a young athlete now who's walked into a similar situation of yours, is there a story or two of what you would have done differently?
Yeah, I definitely would ask. I asked a lot of questions. I asked more questions. Another thing I would have done that's just kind of weird that I would have done, but I look at it then now, like, because right now I'm married 20 years, going on 20 years, and I have 4 girls. Everything is about college education. I got to pay for 4 weddings, and then just making sure your estate planning is done. And I think you when you're young, you don't think you're going to die or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I did have a disability policy, which I did, and I did that, and that was a smart thing that I did. Was a disability and policy that I did. The thing I would do differently is that, because you come into a lot of wealth at that time, obviously I have life insurance and good life insurance and business insurance as well for my family to make sure the estate planning. But I would also put, like, my parents, most parents, and they don't get it for their parents or anything like that. And I said, if I would have known better, I would tell a lot of the young guys, if their parents don't have life insurance, buy a policy for them, pay the premiums, because the chances are, your parents are not going to live, maybe not your whole career. For me, my dad died in my 3rd year, and our mom is still alive, But I know a lot of guys that I played with that have lost their parents during their playing career or whatnot, and that's like, if you can afford it, I would, cover your parents. I have insurance because it takes care of their estate, and also feels like they leave something for their kids and their grandkids. Is that because their premiums won't be as high as when they get into their 70s or anything like that. So if you get a 20-year or 15-year and renew it, I think that would be a good, wise thing for guys to spend money on, and not get a ridiculous amount, but something that makes sense. Yeah. So I think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique perspective. I know we've talked a lot of our clients, young clients that we know are going to be financially responsible for their parents, of looking into long-term care insurance.
Yes.
And, it's
all that included,
Yeah, and it's just an area that when you're a young athlete, that's the last thing you're thinking about.
And that's the first thing, because right now you can get locked into a good number and not wait till they're 70, 75 and you're paying a ridiculous amount of premiums, and you can get locked in, because especially when your earning potential early on could be very, very high nowadays, especially with professional sports. Yeah,
huge. And just the mortality aspect, like you said, is that invincibility as a young athlete. Us trying to get wills and trusts set up, and more than anything, guardianship issues when we have players with children. And so it's unfortunately, it usually takes one of those stark reminders. Baseball lost a player last year to an ATV accident in the offseason, 26 years old. And so it's one of those things that you got to take care of those small parts of business.
And I think and I did a decent, I wouldn't say bare minimum, but if it was a scale of 1 to 10, I probably did about a 5, which still is better than none. But if what I know now, I'll tell guys to be more extensive, like a 9 or 10, a good estate planning from, not only just you, but your, if you're married, your wife, your kids, your parents, your in-laws. Really encompass a good estate planning while you can do it all right there, because you can get locked into some good numbers, and you take care of your family, not just your immediate, but you really can set up your family generationally by doing those things at that time.
Well, maybe just kind of stay on that vein, because I know when I sit down with a lot of our clients, one of their goals is to take care of their family. And we try to talk to them a lot about planning of what does it really mean to take care of your family long term, as opposed to just handout in the short term. And it's not necessarily saying that's never the right thing to do, but did you ever face that in your situation? Or I know your teammates did.
I did too. My dad did well for himself, but I had some stepbrothers and stepsisters, and I did help out. I wanted my nieces and nephews to be in better schools, and so I moved into better neighborhoods, and I bought 3 homes. 3 homes at the time, and they're great values. They're still, all of them right now, they're probably worth about $700,000 a piece, for those family members. And the result of it, nephew ended up playing at Vanderbilt and going to a good private school, and do certain things that were still good. But those are things that I was able to do early on and buy good stuff, and certain things you make good decision on. That was a good decision. Yeah. But you still, to put them on payroll, that's a different story. You can't do that. You really have to sit down and think about long term, and think about where you're at in contract. It can be difficult, but if you have a lot of input and people will trust and see what they've done, to me, the epitome of best deal of all time of good advice from an agent or a financial planner is Bobby Bonilla's agent.
He's still getting that paycheck, $1 million every year.
Yeah. Was it? It's July 2nd, or it was one of the Julys. Either July 2nd or 3rd or 1st. He gets 1 point something. I can't remember.
Every single time.
For the next 20-something years.
Yeah, it's that built-in, almost even security against himself.
Yes.
And obviously he's hopefully been wise with the other, but. Thinking long term of going, this career's going to end at some point, and that paycheck's going to stop. And as much planning as you've done, it's even, emotionally hard when you have money in the bank, but you're not getting paid. I see it every off season with our clients that it's like, I'm not getting paid, regardless of how much money they have in the bank. There's just some emotional thing about it. So getting a paycheck would be interesting. As far as staying on the vein of like who to trust, is you've seen documented, unfortunately, that there are just athletes that get taken advantage of, and entrepreneurs or business owners. Look no further than Bernie Madoff, right? And so it can't just be simply, they've got really wealthy clients because Bernie Madoff, that situation. And, we've unfortunately seen with the NFLPA's registered financial, system that there's been advisors that have been registered that are now behind bars. What are some questions or advice that you would tell people who are looking to help them with their money, that they should
never
ask?
Foolproof. When you're dealing with people, like a saying that I've heard and I use and coin is where there's people, there's poop. So no matter, where you're at, but you can also do your best to do your best litmus paper test you possibly can. You look at track record. You look at how long you've had clients, how long have they been in business, who are their clients, go talk to their clients, how you feel that they helped, retired clients, and then always look at, is the person married, do they have kids, how involved is he, because all that stuff weighs in, not saying it's foolproof, but I love my kids, and so you try to do everything possible to protect them, and then not only that, to provide for them, and to be around for them. And if your name's important, you don't want that to tarnish your kids or your family or wife. So that's a big part of trusting too. So those things are all factors, but they're not foolproof, because I made a couple decisions based off of that, and I've lost money. And I would have made money if I'd have did the other decision. So that's not foolproof. And I'll tell you real quick. So
this is good.
There was a guy that had a clothing company, and he was just starting out. And I wore it when I was in college, and it was awesome. You wear it under your pads, and we developed a relationship that through our equipment manager, and he'd always tell the top guys on offense and defense to wear stuff. And then I got 3 years later, get drafted to the pros. I have money. He wanted me to invest about $500,000. I didn't do it. He wasn't married. It was a startup company, but it was a nice guy. A lot of people knew him. He was great. And I ended up going with guys that I've known. And we all invested into this we owned an arena football team, some property in Austin, Texas, and they were all guys that, not only knew their families, they were married, they were great guys, and we all put a significant amount of money. We bought Austin Wranglers, so it was I was gonna put $500,000, or I was gonna put a little bit more significant with the other person. I knew these guys, so I even give you their names. The guy's Darryl Green. Played for the Washington Redskins. A guy named Tony Baselli played for Jacksonville Jaguar. Mark Brunell played for Jacksonville Jaguar, and then Lee Steinberg, and another guy from Dell Computers, a CFO from Dell Computers, and we all put money into this venture, and we lost like years later.
Wow.
And the person that I ended up going, his name was Kevin Plank. If you know who Kevin Plank is.
Yeah. Under Armour, I think they did okay. Oh, my goodness.
That's a story that,
Man.
So nothing's ever foolproof.
Yeah.
But nothing was done wrong on the other guys, that I went with. It just was poor management. The deal that, we bought some Whataburgers together. It just didn't go well.
Yeah.
And versus, Kevin Plank was trying to get into the NFL, and, it just didn't work out, but it would have been a big difference.
And I think it's hard. I think this is fun, and we can transition a little into the business conversation of that's what's really hard about the alternative space is you don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
So how many clothing companies have always been started, right? I mean, it's the number one thing that we see our guys pitched with, right? Is I got this clothing company. It's the next Under Armour. Well, there's been one Under Armour,
yeah.
you know? And so it's hard to foresee that. And then on the flip side, I think there's a lot of lessons to pull out, even how you guys did that as a group. The fact that you mentioned there's somebody from Dell who, with a finance background.
CFO, he was a CFO. He made $20 million a year. Awesome dude.
Yeah.
And he was a great dude. And then, you have Tony Baselli, Mark Brunell, Darryl Green played in the NFL for 20 years.
Yeah.
Great guys, great. And they're all still great guys.
Right.
But it's just, and I base it off, I was the youngest one in that group.
Wow.
Yeah, so, you think about that. So, and one thing I realized too, and I also say this, don't be scared to fail. Because everybody puts the emphasis off, this guy athlete lost his money. I could tell you there's tons of businessmen that made millions and lost their money constantly and make it back. The only difference is this. You only get one opportunity pretty much in professional sports to make money. And if you don't make it during that time period, it's hard because your body, you only got a chance to do it because there's a life expectancy on sports.
Right.
So it's no longevity. Versus business, if a businessman loses his money and he made several million in 10, 12 years and then loses it, but then he can work another 5 or 10 years after that and gain it back, and he can lose it again, then work another 10 years again and make it back again.
Right.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you can make good decisions and still lose money.
Right.
It's like, 2008 came. A lot of people were somewhat responsible.
Absolutely.
And just got caught.
Yep.
So, as long as you feel like, hey, you weren't buying, millions of dollars worth of jewelries and 10 or 20 cars and 20 homes and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's where you run into trouble, and that's where. But I would say, don't be fearful to take calculated risk and with input, but also don't beat yourself up if things don't go well and you were responsible as well.
I think it's great advice. I actually had dinner last night in LA with Ryan Neese, who played in the league a little bit and now runs Next Play Capital, a VC fund. And we were just having the same conversation that it's really more about learning about risk and making educated decisions.
Exactly right.
And, and also if you make enough money in sports, allocating a portion, not all of it, right? And I think that's where guys get in trouble. And we're seeing it a lot now where it's really sexy to get into this VC world. As an athlete. It's, the athlete wants to be the entrepreneur now, and it's why we started this podcast, is saying, I don't think that's a bad thing. Let's just do it in an educated way. Let's get
what you're doing
with experienced professionals. And how would you, what type of advice? You obviously moved into car dealerships. Talk about how you decided to go down that.
My dad was in the car industry for close to 30 years.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the business. He owned 4 auto parts stores in the Virgin Islands, one of the very first guys to do that in the Virgin Islands. And so I grew up there. And so I went from shipping and receiving and going to the container ports to pick up shipments, and then go to the hot box to stock it, and called it the hot box. And then, because it was downstairs in the warehouse, and I'd have to stock it and label it and price it. And then from there, went to sales and learning to deal with customers, and then I ran it for a year.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew I didn't want to stay in the Virgin Islands, even though I spent every summer there. My parents were divorced. We went back and forth from Miami to there. It's hard to be in a small island with 40,000 people on it versus growing up in Miami. It's like you have all the things in a big city that you have. So being around cars, I remember first Learjet that I saw. The CEO of Champion Spark Plugs came down to the Virgin Islands with his Learjet to meet with my dad, because he's like, who's buying all these spark plugs, and I think it's just an excuse for the CEO to come to the house. But that was my first time seeing a Learjet, being a part of that, and so I always liked business, and so saw an opportunity my first year. Was a good buy in Florida, and I knew I was still living partly in Florida and here. And me and another football player that was my roommate in college. It was Peter Bowler, and he's actually still in the car business. We sold those, got out of those, and I did in 2010. He did it earlier, but he kept the one in Tallahassee, okay. So he has a legacy Toyota in Tallahassee, Florida. But that's where I saw an opportunity. We went from 2 stores and grew it to 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about 2008. If you had it through 2010, I mean, you experienced the crisis.
I got beat up.
Did you?
Yeah, I got beat up. Yeah. We did well. We were growing anywhere from 200 to 400% a year. And then when the downturn hit, we were flush with capital, so we knew that we can ride this out. But we did. You think you're going to ride this out for maybe 6 months or 3 months, and then 18 months later, it's still no sight and sound. So we ended up selling it. We didn't sell at a good price, but no one had to declare bankruptcy or do any of that stuff because we were burning through capital. But those were B markets that I had those dealerships in. If we were A markets and we had them a little bit longer, we probably would have had a chance to really ride out. Wouldn't make much, but a lot of the ones in the A markets, a lot of their revenue came in the service department, and that's where you really, the bread and butter was the sales. What kept the doors open and paid the electricity and the bills was your service department. But when you're in a B market where there's secondary homes, and Ocala, Florida, Gainesville, Florida, Destin, Florida, those are all secondary homes. So what are the first homes to go? Your secondary homes.
Absolutely.
But then so the bigger cities that you have your A market dealerships are the ones going to last longer because they might not be buying new cars, but they're going to be getting service to keep those cars good. Where we weren't getting that kind of traffic because those secondary markets were mostly a lot of buys with a little bit of service, but the kind of that. But we weathered through it and was able to sell.
How? What advice would you give to players that are actively in their careers and are thinking about wanting to start to allocate capital to outside ventures? It sounds like you had a background because your dad, very knowledgeable, very business minded. Talk about the importance of the type of investment activity.
There's everybody's you could be a serial entrepreneur. If you have a business mindset, which is totally fine. But I always tell guys, if you're not really a person that's business, like you want to start something from the ground up and be in a different field, I always tell people this: stick with what you know, no matter what it is. If it's guys that are they like to buy and sell cars. If you're good at buying and selling cars and you know how to make a profit, obviously you have a savvy. Maybe you should be selling used cars. Or if you're good at buying and selling sneakers, guys I know kids that they buy online, I don't know what the name, Jeezys or Yeezys and all that stuff, and they get them and they end up making $400 or $500. That's a knack. So you know that. So you know the margin, you know what you could sell it for, you feel comfortable for it. There's a gentleman that is a youth pastor that I'm involved in ministry, and he's a part of one of the ministries I started, and he's a youth pastor, and he's a big Golden State fan, and he has season tickets, and obviously youth pastors don't make tons of money, but he buys season tickets, and he's been buying season tickets. And when he can go see the games, he can. But when he can't go, because he lives here in Arizona, he knows how he can sell them because he knows the margin and what to sell the tickets for. And his wife didn't quite understand, but then when you put a pencil to it, he makes a hefty profit every year by owning those season tickets because he knows it.
Right.
It's not, and he does it. Like for me, I don't want to. No part of that.
Right.
Even though he's making, making money, I don't put. Well, maybe the other guys see. Well, I'm gonna do it easy. I'm gonna buy season tickets too. Chances are they're gonna lose money.
Right.
Because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But he knows what he's doing because he knows it. Yeah. So the best advice I was saying for anybody that wants to get into business, have a passion for it and and feel like if you know it, it become a little bit easier for you.
Yeah.
It helps with the risk.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same vein as what I'm hearing you saying too, is it's something you got to be passionate about.
Yeah.
It's not just the sake to make money, you know, and I think that that's one of the biggest conversations just with our clients in general is money's good to have, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't provide happiness. So just more isn't better always, you know? And so what was your experience with that? Was there, you know, was purpose ever connected to money? You know, how did you
I was very ministry minded. So I helped start 7 churches. You know, I have part of doing different things when it came to charity. I'm still involved in a lot of charity organizations, being on their board and stuff like that. So that's a big motivation, is to be able to give back. So I enjoy that. It's a good. It makes me feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a scripture, John 10:10 says this: the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come to give you life and life to the full. Life to the full meaning that, if you have full of peace, that means you'll be able to give peace to others. If you have full of time, you'll be able to give some of your time together. If you're financially able to give, you're able to give because you have more to give to something you have, whatever it be, wisdom, time, money, or whatever it is, happiness. Those are the things that extra that you have is your gift to someone else. Yeah. And so, does money make things better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. It's fun. You enjoy stuff. You're less stressful. You can purchase it. You don't have to think about those things. When you can operate in a certain way that you don't have to worry so much about those things, you can be more effective.
Yeah.
Bible talks about that too, not being in debt and all those types of things. But
I think of it, I don't know the exact quote, but Mark Cuban had essentially made a comment that money's like a multiplier. If you've got a healthy life, it's going to make life great. If you're a miserable person, it's just going to make you more miserable.
That's another thing that I would say. Like if you are a drug addict with a lot of money, you're not smoking crack. You're going to be doing cocaine, the best drugs. If you're an alcoholic, it's not going to be Thunderbird or Wild Irish Rose. It's going to be the high-end alcohol. If you're a misogynist or you're just perverted, you're going to go to the instead of going to the lowest strip club, you're going to go to the highest strip club.
Right.
So, but if you're, like I said, if you're going to be a multiplier of the things that you like, it's going to bring more happiness to those things to have. So, 100%, I agree with that.
Talk about just the platform of professional athletes, from having the ability to make an impact on their families, the communities, the world. It was something that I've read articles from yours, or listened to podcasts of, early on in your career, you started a Bible study. I think you had made the comment of, we have all this influence and most guys had no idea. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's changed because I think people know that we were just talking about with social media, the influence people, because now we never talked about when I played, about you didn't realize how powerful your influence or reach was. Now there's actual job titles called influencers. That's their job, is because their influence of whatever they like or do, they're doing. But it's a big thing, and you don't want to. And I think people are realizing that at an early age now, is that usually people wait back then till later in their life to give their tail end in their life instead of giving their best in the beginning. And a lot of professional athletes says, I'll do that later. Or I'll do that later. Or I'll do that later. And then you find 50 years, 55, 60, it's like, man, I could have been more of an influence and give bigger impact when I was 22, 23, 24, in the early age. And a lot of the athletes now, I wouldn't say everyone, but a lot of the people they've been doing a good job. I think LeBron James has just done, there's not even a comparison, compare LeBron to Jordan of the influence because of the platform you have and how well he's done.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to make it, you know, Tiger Woods, even though he's had his downfall, but he understood the influence he had from a marketability standpoint. Where LeBron, not only just marketing, but with kids, and just, it's unbelievable. Now I think people are realizing more so that they do have a lot of influence.
Yeah, I mean, what LeBron has done and continues to do, you know, he's got his whole uninterrupted, you know, and just what I love to see about it too is he's making other people better, right? It's from...
And that's what being an influencer is.
Yeah. And I think that that's the unique thing is it's not just a money grab. And for him, of course, he's making money and he's going to do that long term, but he's affecting change, you know, in so many people's lives.
You know, Deion Sanders, Florida State guy. We had the same agent as well. And his Hall of Fame speech says this. He had one of the quotes he had in there says, "If your dream is about yourself and it's not bigger than yourself, then you're dreaming the wrong dream." That's basically what he said in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Your dream should be a lot more than just about you. And that's what strived him, is about to take care of his mom, his family. Because it was bigger than just, you know, because everybody thinks all prime time. You know, it's always about them. But his dream was far bigger than prime time. That's what drove him, was to do things outside to help people in his family and the people in his community, which and you could see that's all he does with his football teams, all that he does. It's bigger than himself, even though it may look like it was all about prime, but it was building a brand, that was a dream that was bigger than himself.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, I mean, obviously you're living that. I think for people trying people that don't know, you know, we're sitting here at Impact Church is where you're the executive pastor, in addition to, you know, we'll talk about Creamistry and your business ventures, and, you know, that's how we met, you know, from Fisher Sports. I think back to, I was a young minor league baseball player, and the fact that you were accessible, and that, you know, we had the Bible study over at Brett Fisher's house, and I think just the way that you know, you made yourself available, especially to a bunch of us younger kids, was that. And it's something that, you know, how important is that when you think about mentorship, when you think about raising your own kids? Talk to us about that.
It's big. I think if you can't, I think that's a necessity of life to give back. And I think it's a biblical thing. I think only in the kingdom of God you get more by giving. And I think I realized that early on, is that there's something that you receive innate when you generally give unconditionally, and that doesn't mean monetarily, financially, but just of your time, and you feel like you're helping someone that you're one step ahead of, because you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a theologian or a genius to help someone. You could just be one step ahead of them and say, "Hey, watch out for that turn."
Yeah. And
that one watch out to tell them that could just catapult them into a whole new direction in their life, to be whatever, CEO, owner, because you told them to watch one turn, because you helped them not take two steps back, or a pitfall that really derailed them for a period of time. And so giving back, when you look back, I could say, man, I was a part of that person's life, or a part of someone's life to help. It's the biggest something that you can take, that I don't know how to describe it or feel it, is that you get more by giving. And it sounds corny, but it's so true. You get more by giving.
Yeah. Talk about that. Now, this is more talking to our business owners and our entrepreneurs. That mentality, you have a staff of 20 plus people here. Creamistry, 110 staff. Yeah, Creamistry, you've got employees, you've got all types of employees, right? From the young kids to managers to talk about leadership, influence, and that whole giving back of the type of culture you're trying to create.
Culture's a big thing. It's tough. And you're always trying to define, not only just, you know what your culture wants to be, but you got to constantly change, because the world's changed around, is constantly changing. Especially as a business owner, you know, the kids nowadays are totally different, and I don't mean that as like, there are generational gaps that change drastically, and I think this generation has changed drastically. I think in the last, say, 30 years to 15 years, like when you have internet, that has changed the world so much, light years faster than anything else have. So you have, from, airplane transatlantic traveling to the car to, microwaves to the internet, cell phones, communication. You can get so much done before you even leave your house in the morning.
Right.
I remember when I used to work for my dad, and there's, not even really beepers, but like you couldn't answer or return a phone call unless you got to your office and listened to your messages and talk during business hours. Yeah. Now you can send emails in the middle of the night, text messages, all these different things that you have. So to help this generation now and to be in that culture, you have to understand what motivates, what drives, and that's the biggest thing for me now, especially in church atmosphere or business atmosphere, is finding out what drives our generation now. How do I communicate to this generation now? What's gonna get them to be motivated, and it's not gonna be motivating and different, because it's different. Yeah. It's different because they can still get the same production, but not the way that we thought back then. It's like before I'll go out and dig a ditch. Now, someone else, the generation now, is like, I want to do 20 ditches, but I'm not going to be the one that's going to be digging it. I want to find a way to do it easier. Yeah. And so I think culturally, that's probably the toughest thing, is trying to make sure you're communicating correctly in the culture that you have, and what's going to motivate them.
Yeah, wow. You're right, of the whole, we can get so much more done quicker, right? And there's information overload, and I think when you're high productive people, it's also like there's a price of success, that it breeds more success, that ultimately you're so busy you start to be unsuccessful. How have you managed that personally? What tips would you share with the community, or how are you trying to deal with that?
I think we're all trying to figure that out, but I think the answer I would say to this is that you should always have calibrations. Stop, and so I think vacations are good, and recalibrate on a 6-month to a yearly time to reflect. What am I doing? Am I being productive? What can I do to be more productive? What I need to cut out, what I need to put in. I think you have to stop and stop all the noise and say, okay, what have I done from this period to that period? What have I done from this period in a 2-year standpoint? Am I being productive? Because, man, I was just talking to somebody before we started this podcast on the phone, and he goes, yeah, remember that investment we did? And I said, yeah. Wasn't it about a year and a half ago? He goes, no, man, it's going to be about 3.5 years now. It's like, but that's how fast life goes. Right. It says, it just goes so fast because you're doing so much at the same time. So definitely recalibration. Always trying to calibrate, where you're at, because you can easily get tilted off and you're off course. Yeah. And when things were slower, you had more time to think, but now it's like you can be moving so fast, and 6 months is gone that fast. Yeah. Years is gone that fast. So I think you need to have those little breaks in there to calibrate. For the younger business owners, entrepreneurs, athletes, you said you've been married coming up on 20 years. Yeah. You have 4 daughters. What advice do you have for family? As an athlete and as a business entrepreneur? Yeah. Well, you got to be good scheduler. You have to, like, things that are important to me. Like, I have a daughter coming up, going in her sophomore year of high school, and I have taken her to school since she's been in preschool.
No way.
Yeah. So, so my time with them in the morning, driving to school, is a big thing. And then not only that, I make sure I take her to all her sporting events. Mostly I took her to all her dance events, anything extracurricular. And this is the Monday through Friday, because that's always the toughest, because that's when your work week is, and work schedule, and they have their school schedule. And I find that time to be the best time that we have, because from taking them to school, picking them to school, or taking them to extracurricular activity, you're spending anywhere from 2 to 3 hours with them on a good quality time with them, in commuting and talking. And I've learned a lot and enjoyed it during that time. Now, if you have the chance to be the coach or the team mom or team dad, I encourage for all those time for family time. And also, if you can somehow get a quick vacation in there in summertime, that's always a good time for family.
We have a lot of wives that listen to this podcast as well, a lot of the wags. And talk about just, if you're talking directly to some of our athletes, and I guess this holds true for me as a business owner, a lot of times you can hear the sentiment that the wife's kind of just along for the ride. It's the player's career. It's your business. And I think that's, we see it a lot, because a lot of the issues around couples, they think it's about money, but when we start to really not even have to do much work, you really understand it's really not about money as much as it's just the relationship. What advice would you talk on marriage?
Well, they play a big role in the household, because the household is a business. The household's a business, keeping it together, keeping schedules, especially for having 4 kids. That's tough to keep a schedule.
Yeah.
That's one thing. So if housewife is doing, that's a business, and they should treat it like a business and understand it's a big important thing. On the second side of that, if my wife's very active, and she's gotten more so active as she's gotten older, and so I think if a wife has aspirations more so than being at home taking care of the kids, but also work that in there. Just recently in the last several years, I've invited my wife to be a part of a couple board meetings for charities, and the result of it, she started liking it, and she became an auctioneer. She wanted to become a realtor, all these different things, because most of them have degrees but never had a chance to use them.
Yeah.
Wife, graduated from ASU. She's an ASU alum, and she's just skyrocketed. Obviously, she did modeling, she does acting, but she really has blossomed in that. And I think if I would say allow her to be a part of some of the daily activities that you do. Let it be, if it's charitable work or it's a business meeting or being a part of something, because maybe you might find to be a help and to be an asset to the whole household from a business standpoint, not just a house business.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Transition a little bit to kind of just lessons through difficulty. I mean, from a lot of people maybe tuning in who don't know your background, they could say, oh, signed for a lot of money, life's been pretty easy, through 08, 17 surgeries, right?
17 surgeries, about to, believe it or not, sad to say, 18. I'm actually getting an MRI today at 5 o'clock on my left knee.
Oh, geez.
I thought I was going to play 15 years in the pros. Football, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, was it was coming to me very easily. Even my first year to my second year, I battled 7 years and fully retiring in 2007 through injuries. And going in 1998 was my first year. I went to the National Football League Hall of Fame because I got invited because a couple guys I played with. And the year I went, 3 guys that I played with went in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Wow.
So Aeneas Williams, Derek Brooks from Florida State, and Walter Jones at Florida State. And I played against Walt in practice all the time. And I know if I felt like I had a healthy career, I would have a good opportunity as well. But when you play professional sports, you know, I never got hurt in college, never got hurt in high school. You just never know. But you play a tough sport, and your body sometimes can't make it. Regardless how well. I wasn't a drinker, wasn't a smoker. I ate well. I'm fat and sloppy now, but but I was at that time I was in shape. But it was a lot of adversity, and so it wasn't ideal. It was a tough mental transition, even though I was transitioning business wise, and I had a lot of outsource. And I think what allowed me to handle it is because I gave of my time. I gave, and so it filled a void of not fulfilling the desire to compete at a high level and give professionally what I wanted to give, because I was very highly motivated and very competitive at that time. I call it the athlete disease, because sometimes my wife wouldn't play me in Uno, board games. It was disgusting, but when you're wired that way, that's it's just got to compete. Yeah. But I think the outlet of giving of time and effort really pacified that and helped the transition mentally, and to do that. So, because if you're all consumed by that, it can be very tough to transition. So it definitely wasn't all tiptoeing through the tulips. I still, I bet you still have dreams sometimes that you're pitching in the game or playing or I'm running against someone. It's like, if you could play it forever, I would have played it forever. Yeah.
Share a little bit, and maybe you didn't face this, but I see this a lot with our retired guys, and honestly on the business side too. I've seen it with some of our clients that have sold their businesses, and their identity is so tied to the business that they've created or the sport that they've played that transition, for most of our clients, money is not an issue. And so it's like they're set for life, but that 2-year window of transition has been really hard. Speaking to that.
Well, like I said, giving is a big part of it. Every person that I know, not just professional, because I know a lot of wealthy guys that are in business, they find a niche of where they can be an asset to somebody or an organization and help develop systems, processes, and also to give back. And because you're still putting the same effort and tool, but not the same pressure that you have, but you get to use what talents that are given to you to help somebody. And if I tell everybody, if you transition, retiring, all that stuff, definitely find something that you're passionate about that you can give to. There's one gentleman that lives in Colorado Springs, has a very successful metal business, and he fabricates and makes stuff for train air conditioners for around the world. So it's very successful, and so he's always been good with his hands. He's a tinker. He's always tinkering with stuff. He's just good with his hands, and he's done very well for himself. But what helped him transition is that he goes to Haiti, Zimbabwe, he goes all over the world they could possibly think of, and he builds homes. And he uses containers, he builds the metal in his own metal shop, and he donates his time, his money, his efforts, and he changes communities, and he just enjoys it. And he probably works harder now than in his jobs. And that's what usually happens. You end up working harder then, but the motivation is totally different. And the return is not the financial return that you were working so hard for. Right. It's a return that you can't put a price on that's so much more fulfilling. And I know it sounds corny, but it's so true. Yeah. No, that's great advice. I mean, I think it's funny today we have more access to wealth, we have more access to leisure, to all of these things, and I think there's
we're seeing from our millennials, or just really for everybody, is there's more to life than just more stuff.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's a better perspective that gives you gratitude when you start to see other perspectives.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you go to a third world country, or you don't even have to go to a third world country. Here you can drive a couple streets down.
Oh, yeah.
I always say perspective. When we talk to guys about spending and things like that, the best thing is just perspective.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
you take them somewhere, and it changes their heart, because we're human,
Yeah.
and I think you start to care about people in that way.
No, 100%.
So, yeah. And then, you know, wrapping up, just, you know, talk a little bit of, you transitioned into, now you own some creamistry franchises. How did you get into that? I heard it was a trip to Newport.
Newport Beach. A guy named Rick Warren is a pastor, and it goes into, you know, that's one of my top books, Purpose Driven Life, along with the Bible and Maximize Manhood. But you know, Rick has been a part, and we do a lot of the modeling at Impact Church from Purpose Driven Life, and from, you know, everything that Rick Warren's about. So we were there visiting, and David Shawn, his executive, along with, I think, Rick himself, said, "Hey, you need to check out this ice cream. Let's please, we just go after dinner. We're going to go check this out." And it was the first one, 2013, and it was October. I think it opened up in September. Long line, and then nitrogen concept. And I said, you know what? And then I took my wife shortly after. We were vacationing there after, because we'd always go to Newport, and she goes, "This would work well in Arizona." And the guy wasn't franchising at all. And I said, well, I kept his name, his number, and then after he got about a year and a half under his belt and got his grasp, because it was just crazy. It was a new concept.
Yeah.
And so bought the rights for the state of Arizona.
Wow.
And Florida. Yeah.
And now, where do you sit now as far as how many stores, employees?
6 stores, 110 employees, looking at 2 more locations. And
wow.
Going from there. Yeah.
Is this your first experience in franchises?
Franchises, yes.
Yeah. And, how different is that investing? What was the learning curve?
Learning curve, it's always, the employee standpoint is always the same. When you're dealing with people, it's always the same. Cash flow, all the same. You know, P&Ls, all the same. The way that things change in the market is fine. It's, you're fighting for margin, and then number 2 is that what was changed a lot is, you know, labor laws. Wages have changed drastically since I've opened up. I think it's increased almost something like 28%.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, we went from a minimum wage of, I think it was $7 and change, or $8 and change. Now we're at $10.50.
Wow.
So that was a matter of 14 months. So I didn't have that penciled in.
Yeah.
So that was a big change on a lot of different stuff. You know, certain product cost, all this stuff. So learned a lot of those things, and work fighting for margin. But I enjoy it. I actually enjoy it, and I like the idea of concept, and you know, thinking about different concepts and starting our own concept. But it's a good way to get into stuff. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's your background, and I think it's where it's very unique is the car dealerships, the franchising, and stuff that a lot of athletes are attracted to.
Oh.
But the entrance into it, I think there's a lot to learn from how you did
yes,
it with,
yeah.
you know, with actual expertise in the way. Talk just a little bit about that instead of, hey, you just didn't throw some money at it.
No. You have to have to know the background. You have to know, is it going to make sense? You have to know the market. You have to find the right real estate. You know, you have to be, like for me, you know, I had 6 car dealerships, but I only owned, at the time, it was like 3 cars. And my wife had one, and we had an extra one. But, and they weren't big, expensive cars, where some athletes will have 10 cars or 8 cars. Same thing with the ice cream. I actually go in, you know, and buy my own ice cream at my own stores.
Wow.
And so, because you have to understand, it's like people have to pay attention to percentages, labor percentage. You got to pay for product percentage. You know, how much you're spending on, food costs, product, and you have nitrogen costs, and you have all those different things, and you got to put a penalty. You have to put your business degree to work.
Yeah.
And so for it to make sense, I think real estate's a big thing. I think a lot of people think a lot of businesses fail. And I think a lot of times, if the product is so good, doesn't matter where you put it, people will come to. But chances are, real estate, it don't care if you're buying a home, you're getting a business. If you're in the right spot with you have to hedge it right.
Yeah.
And so some people say, well, I'd rather have low rent and and off the beaten path, and people eventually come to me. Or you can spend 30-40% in marketing to try to people get there, or you rather just spend the extra 20% extra in rent and get the same foot traffic.
Put it on the right corner.
Yeah. So I think real estate is a big thing for guys that if you're whatever business you're looking at, make sure you negotiate. If you're buying, leasing, really pay attention to your contracts, really pay attention to the area, really pay attention to the growth. And we did well, like even the car dealerships. We bought some property and we built in Destin and in Ocala. We got in with the politics of the city, planning, knowing where roads are going in, knowing where traffic flow is, traffic count. I don't think a lot of people put a lot of time. They put a lot of time in concept, business, and idea of it, but they don't think about, we'll just find a building. We'll just find, no. Real estate is always a key for, especially anything when you're dealing with retail.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with retail. Yeah. If you're a warehouse or distributor, doesn't matter.
Right.
You know what I mean? As long as you're accessible to get where you need to distribute whatever product you're distributing, but and find a good cheap. But if you're any kind of retail, you got to make sure that your real estate's good.
Yeah, I love just this last segment of you talking, because the same way that as an athlete you put a full dedication to be a professional.
Yeah.
I think what I hear you're a businessman.
I'll try. I'm not the best.
but you're executing.
Trying your best.
The stuff that you're supposed to do. It's not just, hey, there's a concept, let's write a check and it's all going to work out. It's there is a lot of hard work and due diligence that comes into it.
And good pride about that. Like I think our partner and I, our pride gets a lot in, I think our locations are just monster locations. And it took time. And those are the reason why when we do have hiccups in business, because you picked the right place, or you negotiate a good lease, or negotiate a good contract or something like that, those stuff come and help you down the road. And I think a lot of people, and what I learned especially through life and businesses, is that you got to look down the road when you're in the beginning. And just don't expect everything to go well. You got to make sure you're covered. Read your contracts, read your leases, read your stuff, because you learn a lot.
Yeah, I learned that early in my business of, we transitioned from just being only a financial advisor to actually being a business owner, where you're now leasing buildings and you're doing those type of things, and attention to detail. And I think that one of my favorite, quotes, like just sports analogies, is like, you can't be caught flat-footed.
No.
Like you
on your toes.
You better be on your toes,
ready to change directions.
And change directions and paying attention. And it's not even that people are ill-intentioned. It's just a lot of times people will throw templates and contracts in, and it's like, these are the documents that up front you better put the work in, because when things go bad, this is what's going to dictate everything. And so paying attention to the details is huge. Yeah.
100%.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been
thanks for having me. It's good catching up with you.
Yeah, and I know our athletes and entrepreneurs appreciate it. So thanks for being on the podcast, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
All right. Take it easy.
Thank you so much for listening to the Athlete CEO podcast. I hope you enjoyed our show today and are ready to take action on the advice from today's episode. Our goal with the Athlete CEO podcast is to make it the go-to resource for athletes and entrepreneurs looking to take their game to the next level. Love the show?
you have any suggestions on how we can improve, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email, tweet, and share your thoughts. We do our best to read every single one. We'll see you next week with another world-class episode.